Shall we start?
Yes.
Okay. So, Ritvik, before moving forward, can you tell me something about yourself? What kind of work you are doing in our current organization?
So right now I am working with KMG IT Services, Gurgaon. Right. So I have been working with this firm for close to 2.5 years. So right
Okay.
now I am working in a hybrid environment in which 50% of that includes cloud and DevOps, and 50% of that includes IT internal operations. So if I talk about IT internal operations, so all the issues which are related to users and all of the infra using servers and firewalls. And if I talk about cloud, so whatever are the requirements are for the production environment, my task is to uh, create those resources for production environment and hand over those to the clients.
Okay. So, we talk about the DevOps tool side of it. Which tools you have used?
So I have used Docker and Jenkins and a little bit of Kubernetes, etc.
Mm-hmm.
So Terraform and Kubernetes are secondary skills, and if I talk about primary skills, so Linux, AWS, Docker, etc. are primary.
Okay. That's great. So, let's just start with the AWS first.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. So, you have mentioned that you are experiencing Amazon EC2 instance.
Mhm.
Okay. So can you tell me the types of EC2 instances that are available in AWS console, and when we should use this type of instance?
So the one is general purpose EC2 instance, one is spot instances, one is reserved instances, scheduled instances, dedicated host instances. So there are various scenarios in which we have to use different types of EC2 instances. So if we want, there is any application which is like uses equal amount of balance type of CPU, RAM, etc. So we have to use general purpose instances. Apart from that, if we want to test anything and for temporary purposes, so for that we use spot instances, so because those are very cheap. And if we want to uh, like we have to deploy anything for some very long time, 2 to 3 years, so for that we can use schedule instances. And if we have to dedicate any EC2 instance for ourselves, for that we use dedicated instance, so that will be dedicated for us only, it will not be shared.
Okay, okay. So if we talk about the security point of view,
Hmm.
there are certain type of things we generally use in a VPC.
Hmm.
First one is the security view. Second one is NACL.
NACL.
Yeah. So can you tell me the difference between these two things?
So security groups are if one is stateful and one is stateless. So if inbound is allowed, outbound is traffic is allowed in a security group. And if we talk about NACL, so basically we have to define both ingress and in egress uh, traffic.
Mhm.
So that is the main difference.
Okay. And when we should use NACL?
So if we want more security and outbound traffic is also needs to be monitored. So for that, at that time we have to use NACL. Otherwise, we have to use security groups. So
Okay. Okay, that's good. So let's take a scenario. Okay. Let's suppose we have an EC2 instance.
hmm,
Okay. And we lost the PAM file.
hmm.
Okay. How will you recover that data from that particular EC2 instance?
So for that, this is a very general kind of scenario. So we will create another EC2 instance,
Uh-huh.
right? And we will deploy it fully. After that, we will detach that volume from that EC2 instance, go to that the EC2 instance which has lost its PEM keys, attach that volume to that EC2 instance, moved those go to that directory and move those keys from the volume to that volume which has lost its PEM files,
Uh-huh.
and that way that issue is fixed.
Okay.
So this is the solution which is given by AWS Knowledge Center.
Right. Okay. So let's. I mean, regarding the AC2 side of it, I mean there are two things which AWS also provide. First one is snapshot. Second one is AMI.
Mhm.
Right. So what is the basic difference between these two things?
So AMI is Amazon Linux image. So basically, when we want to create any EC2 instance, so whenever we are selecting that image, so that is known as AMI, and AMI is the complete EC2 instance, so which includes the bootable files and all the data files. And if I talk about the snapshot, so that includes that is more side of a volume side backup, that is known as the snapshot.
Okay.
So the main difference is that so suppose there is a very big EC2 instance and we have to take the backup of that EC2 instance. So snapshot is a subset of AMI, so it will be backed up faster. So that is why AWS has created that difference. So practically that is the difference.
Okay. And you mentioned RDS Route 53. Okay. Let's suppose we talk about the Route 53. There are different types of routing policies, we can say, which
Yes.
generally AWS provides.
Yes.
So can you tell me the difference between all the routing policies?
So one is weighted policy, in which various weights are given to the servers, and apart from that, one is latency, so that is the time based, and one is geo proximity, in which areas are divided, which can be increased or decreased. One is geolocation, so in that we just define the particular region from where the data will be fetched, no matter the distances. So and one is multi-value, so in those we assign multiple values to the servers. So these are all these are the main differences between the routing policies, and by default in companies weighted is used.
Okay, so there is another routing policy called failover.
So failover routing policy is that in which one server fails, so another will take it up. So that depends upon our scenario.
Can you tell me, the example where we can use a failover routing policy?
So failover routing policy is the scenario where we basically if one server fails, so another will take the load.
Okay. I mean, if I say you need to configure the failover routing policy, so how will you configure?
So failover routing policy I am not configured.
Okay.
So because in our company we are using weighted. So
okay.
But if when we select routing policies, so when we are configuring Route 53, go to bottom, and there we have to select, and after selection we have to configure the policy according to our requirement. So there is that option, dedicated option.
Okay. So you have also mentioned SQS and SNS. Right. So what is the dead letter queue?
Dead letter queue is basically when if the message fails, so all those broken packets will go to dead letter queue.
Okay. So let's suppose what we want. I mean, can you tell me the default behavior of SQS when we configure any SQS in AWS?
Default behavior.
Yeah.
One is FIFO and one is general.
Right.
So basically SQS is basically the reliable transfer of messages. So messages are broken down into further queues, and in that way the messages are passed.
Okay. So you have, other than this, you mentioned DynamoDB.
DynamoDB is non-structured SQL service. So if we want the flexibility and our database size is less, so for that we use DynamoDB.
Okay. So what is DynamoDB streams?
DynamoDB?
Streams. Yeah.
So
So there is a new feature which recently AWS launched called DynamoDB streams.
DynamoDB streams I don't know. One is consistency models I know. So
Okay.
one is strongly consistent, one is loosely consistent. Streams I have not explored till now.
Okay. So you have mentioned a VPC endpoint in your resume.
So
Can you tell me?
So if we want to substitute NAT gateway, so for that we use endpoint. So because it incurs a lot of charges, so if our budget is tight, so we can use VPC endpoint. So basically, it will create a private connection to the services if we want to access.
Okay. Yes. So let's take a scenario. We have our application code in one VPC and database in another VPC. So what is happening when our application codes try to make connection to the database? There is a timeout error which raised by the application code. So can you, tell me the reason why this could happen?
So VPCs, so databases and the application are in different VPCs or the same VPC?
And both are in different VPCs.
So for that, there is a general scenario. First of all, we will check all the our routes, whether they are configured properly or not. We will check the subnets, whether they are properly figured out or not. In security groups, all the ports should be properly open. And apart from that, we will check firewall settings. So if we want to deploy, one is application side database, one is application code, one is database code. So for that, to communicate with them privately, so for them we should use VPC peering, so that private connection is established between them. So if we want to VPC peering, so the communication is much faster and smooth. So these are the troubleshooting steps.
Yeah, that's nice. So if we talk about S3, right? So in S3, let's take a scenario. So what we want the objects which are stored in S3 should move to, a different type of storage after a certain period of time. Okay. So how is there any approach to do such kind of functionality?
Yes. So if we want to move, so one is S3 cross-region replication. For that, the EC, so S3 objects will be moved to another region. So first replication will be 100%, and after that the replications are incremental. So the changes which are done, so only those will be moved to.
So you are talking about the replication or any other thing?
So there is one more option. So in that scenario, what happens is, if my data is stored in S3, so it will automatically move to the storages which are not frequently accessed. So that is known as intelligent tiering. So in that, data will move to archive types of S3 object. So there is some option. Basically, there are three. One is versioning, one is cross-region replication, and one is another. So if we want to move our data that is frequently accessed, so for that we can use cross-region replication. Otherwise, move your objects to the storage types in which those are not accessed frequently. So right now I am unable to recollect that name.
Okay, what is life cycle?
So life cycle is S3 life cycle is the option. So data will automatically move to the storage which are defined by S, which are not uh, accessed frequently.
Okay.
Life cycle is the answer.
Mhm.
Apart from that, it offers versioning and cross-region replication.
Okay. Okay. I mean, if we talk about EC2 instances, when we create a new instance, we can assign a role,
Hmm.
IAM role, to that particular EC2 instance,
Hmm.
right? So, can you tell me the use case of that particular role?
So if roles are basically the temporary permissions which are given to any resource or any particular user. So whenever basically we are give the temporary privileges to any particular resource or a particular user. For that we use role. So go to IAM, go to roles. So there are 4 options. One is SAML, one is web identity, one is cross region permissions, and one is web identity. So and select the resources, and in under resources we have to select the all the permissions and all the privileges. So suppose in case of EC2 we want to give the administrator access or view to the particular user. For that we use role, and when the task is complete those roles will be taken back.
Okay. Let's take another scenario. Let's suppose there is a S3 bucket, and which is private in nature. Okay. I mean, and our application, or we can say our website, we need to show the content of the. I mean, there are a lot of images in the S3 bucket, and we need to show those images on a website from using HTTP endpoint. Okay.
Using
I mean, using HTTP URLs. Okay. I mean, is there any approach to allow the private S3 content to access from some external resources?
Yes,
Is there any approach? Yes. How?
we will make them public.
No. We don't need to make the S3 content public.
So if we want to, so suppose I have created an S3 from my laptop in AWS console, and we want to check after the images via the URL. So for that, if we don't make public, so we will not be able to see. But if we want to see those images in private only, so create an EC2 instance, for example that Windows server, and go to the browser, and so that will be seen internally only. If we want to see it in outside network, so we will have to make it public.
Okay, so there is a concept called signed URL or pre-signed URL.
Which URL?
Signed URL.
Signed URL.
Yeah, pre-signed URL or signed URL. Both are a little bit different things. So, do you know anything about these things?
No, I have not used signed URLs. So basically in my company, so there are web development projects also. So if we want to make it public, so we just make it public.
I mean, using the pre-signed URL or signed URL concept, we can access the content, I mean, private content from external resources.
Okay.
This is the
okay. So actually, sorry about that part. I have not used that signed URL concept.
Okay. And you also mentioned Cloudfront, right? So, I mean, let's take a scenario in Cloudfront. Let's suppose we have two different buckets in two different regions. Let's suppose our primary bucket is in Island region, and the secondary bucket in, you can say, Bombay region. Right? What we want, I mean, and our application code is accessing the content And of that S3 content, there are a lot of images, you can say. So what I want, let's suppose if our primary region goes down, right? Then the request must be served from the secondary region. Okay, so how will you configure such kind of architecture using Cloudfront? Let me give you a hint. What is origin group?
Origin group is basically the group from where the code or any particular data is fetched. So when we are configuring CloudFront, so there are some options in origin. So from there, if we have kept any code in S3, so we select the S3 bucket we have created initially, and the data is pulled from there only. So
an origin group. Any idea about origin group?
Right now I don't remember. CloudFront I had used around 3 to 4 months back.
Okay, no issue. Okay, so you mentioned you use Nagios monitoring. What kind of monitoring we can do using Nagios tool?
So there are two types of Nagios. One is Nagios Core and one is Nagios XI. And apart from that, Nagios Network Analyzer and Nagios Logs are also offered by Nagios. So I am using Nagios XI. So if I talk about Nagios XI, so we can monitor all the CPU, RAM, and all those kind of metrics from our instances. And apart from that, in configure option, we have a lot of options in which we can add the servers. So one is DHCP, EC2, Apache, etc. And apart from that, we have graph facilities also, which are provided by Nagios. So that is why that tool is very popular. And apart from that, we can configure users also in that if the application is large. And apart from that, we can create a mailing service for notifications. So these kind of services are okay. So if I talk about Nagios XI, so the current version is 4.4.
Okay. So if we talk about the load balancer, okay. So there are 3 types of load balancers that are available in AWS.
Yes.
So we generally use classic or application.
No.
Right? So can you tell me the difference between the classic and application load balancer?
So as per my knowledge, classic load balancer was used until 2016, and nowadays network load balancer and application load balancer are being used. So if I talk about classic load balancer, it used to load balance all the traffic, whether it be HTTP, HTTPS, TCP, UDP or TLS. But nowadays network load balancer and application load balancer are used. So if I talk about application load balancer, so the supported protocols are HTTP and HTTPS. So all the traffic which is dependent upon those protocols, that is handled via application load balancer. And if I talk about TCP and UDP, TLS type of data, so that is load balanced by network load balancers.
So let's suppose we are using a lot of EC2 services, not EC2, AWS services in an application. So how will you, let's suppose if there is any issue or any kind of functional breakage occurred in any AWS services, how will you debug?
How will I troubleshoot load balancer? Basically.
Not load balancer, any AWS service.
Any AWS service?
Yes. Let's talk about the application load balancer. How will you troubleshoot?
Please pardon the question.
I mean, let's suppose we are using, uh, you can say we are using load balancer, EC2 instance, a lot of AWS services. Okay, I mean, in the in any project, and network, you can say a functional breakage occur.
Functional breakage.
Yes.
So
how do you troubleshoot the problem?
So what is functional breakage?
It could be anything. It could be from the code side of it, but you need to find out the cause.
So we will need to check the symptom, what is the problem is. So there are several scenarios. So one is that application is working fine in our internal EC2 instance, but if you go to public, so that is not working fine and the latency is very great. So for that, the load balancer is the culprit. Otherwise, we will check our EC2 instances, the status checks whether they are 0 by 2, 1 by 2, 2 by 2, and according to that, we will check restart that EC2 instance or take the EMI or the snapshot and create it all over again. Apart from that, we will check the metrics of all those services. What is the CPU cycles, what is the RAM cycle, what is the network bandwidth. So these kind of, and apart from that, if there are any bottlenecks in subnets or any gateways related, so these are all the troubleshooting steps. Basically the traffic, the points, the interfaces from where the traffic is going to and fro.
Okay. What is CloudWatch?
CloudWatch is the monitoring tool inbuilt in AWS. So by default, it monitors 5 minutes, and if we want to further increase the monitoring, that will further reduce to 60 seconds. But we have to pay for it.
Okay. So let's move to the Docker part. Okay. So Docker, we generally use some kind of you can say instruction while creating the Docker file.
What we create?
Instructions.
Instructions. Yes.
So generally we use run or CMD. Can you tell me the difference between the run and CMD instruction?
So run is basically used to run any image, and CMD is, so if there is any parameter passed in the run command, so the CMD command will be skipped. Otherwise, if there is no parameter in a run command, so CMD command is executed.
No, you said like when you want to execute the Docker image, in this case we use run. Is that true?
So run is basically if you want to run any, so for example run any image, so we use run Nginx or run Apache. So that is basically run is used for to create the layered architecture, and run the image, and CMD is basically used to execute those commands, and if there are any parameters in the run command, so the CMD command is skipped. Otherwise, the CMD command is executed.
Okay. So which tool you have used to create a Docker image?
Tool means?
I mean, I'm not for in the CI process. You need to talk about CI/CD process. Which tool you have used?
In CI/CD, we use Jenkins.
Okay. So if we talk about the Jenkins while creating the job, we generally tell the Jenkins to use which node we want to use, right?
Which node we want to use?
Yes. I mean, if I say you need to use multiple nodes in a CI/CD process, in a single CI/CD process,
Mhm.
how do you use multiple nodes?
So in our script, whatever the CI/CD pipeline script is, so we will assign a node in that script, node 1, node 2.
Mhm.
So in that we will include in our scripts.
Okay. 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 So, when we talk about Jenkins, uh, there are a lot of syntax we generally use while creating the Jenkins file.
What?
I mean, there are certain type of syntax, or we can say instruction kind of thing
Uh,
we generally use in a Jenkins file.
mm.
Right? Can you tell me any kind of instruction or any kind of syntax we generally use?
So yes, so there is a dedicated syntax to that. So basically in Jenkins we use two types of pipelines or scripts. So one is declarative and one is scripted. So Jenkins file is a declarative type of the coding. So the syntax includes first of all we write the pipeline, and after that we create stages. So under stages, whatever other stages is like build, prod, test, QA, etc. And inside that script we can specify the Jenkins URL to pull the code, and apart from that we have agent in which the particular agent in which the file is to be created. So in that way the syntax goes.
Okay.
So the various stages are specified in Jenkins. That may be build, prod, test, QA.
Okay. How's your Terraform? I mean, how many projects you
So Terraform, I have basic knowledge. So Terraform is basically an infrastructure as a code tool. So what we do is we write a Terraform file uh, in which we write certain commands. So infrastructure as a code is basically used so that we create and write the code files in beforehand, and if our infrastructure goes down, so we implement that, so the infrastructure is up in lesser time. So if we want to configure Terraform, so Terraform, first of all do Terraform init, define whatever the commands are, and to apply Terraform, Terraform applies the command. So in this way we apply Terraform.
okay. Mm, So, if we talk about the Kubernetes,
Hmm.
okay, so how many projects you've done?
So if I talk about Kubernetes, in my company, I am responsible only for the installation of Kubernetes, and I have basic and theoretical knowledge about Kubernetes.
Okay,
So because the Kubernetes, it's a very vast and complex topic, so the client senior engineers are responsible for implementing those projects. Our task
okay,
is to create an EC2 instance or any other server, install Kubernetes according to their requirements, and hand over it to them. And further, they do orchestration part.
okay. So you just said your responsibility to install the Kubernetes. Okay. So
Uh,
let's suppose, I mean, you need to install the Kubernetes on EC2 instance.
hmm.
Yeah. I mean, how will you deploy the Docker images from Jenkins to the, to the configured Kubernetes environment.
How will I deploy Docker?
Yeah, Docker images using Jenkins to the configured Kubernetes.
So Kubernetes requires a containerization tool, so that is majority of the time Docker, but I have not used Jenkins with Docker and Kubernetes. I mean, I have created a pipeline of Docker in conjunction with Jenkins, but all the three combined I have not used.
Okay. So if we talk about the Kubernetes, what is control plane?
Control plane.
Yes.
No idea. I mean, right now I don't remember.
Okay. So, and there are certain kind of concept we generally use in Kubernetes. First one is a PD, that is persistent volume. Second one is persistent volume claim. PVC.
Yes.
Can you tell me the difference or the use case of these things?
So, Kubernetes uses containers. So if we talk about the data, right? So data is deleted when container exits or destroyed. So we use persistence volume to retain our data. So there are various types of containers. So if I talk about persistence volume, so those are in like a divided states, and if we want to keep them in a single unit, so for that we use persistent volume claims.
Okay. So I am done with the question. Do you have any question for me?
No, sir.
Okay. That's good. Thank you, Ritvik. Thanks for your time.
But okay. I have one question. Like you had asked me the Cloudfront question. So if primary goes down, secondary will be up. So
Yes.
So, can you tell me for my knowledge, because I didn't face that kind of scenario?
So let's suppose if we use to create a disaster recovery management system. Okay, and for that case, there must be some kind of backup thing. For that purpose, we can use a multiple S3 bucket. I mean, both buckets could be in a different region, and we want to deliver the content over a HTTP URL. In that case, we can configure the Cloudfront, in which there is a thing called origin group, in which we generally tell the Cloudfront which bucket we want to use as primary data source.
Okay.
Okay, and let's suppose if our primary region goes down, then Cloudfront automatically transfers the request to the secondary. So in this, when we need such kind of architecture, in this case we can use Cloudfront as a DR purpose other than cache.
Okay. And regarding CloudFront, I have one more question. So I am not getting solution to that. So how dynamic data is accessed from the CloudFront?
Sorry?
How dynamic data is accessed via CloudFront?
Dynamic data, can you elaborate more?
So dynamic data is basically, one is static and one is dynamic, in which the backend is also there. So how dynamic data will be?
Backend is there. Backend, unless there is a node code, you are node or Python application. Are you talking about it? So, if I get you, are you talking about to access the private content using CloudFront or some other thing?
So basically, we have one front end. So suppose there is an IRCTC site, so it has one front end and one back end, right? Database. So that is a dynamic kind of website. So how the dynamic data is pulled, because in S3 we only keep the static content, and after that when we configure Cloudfront, we select the S3 option in the starting, and in that way that code is pulled. So what if that is a like it contains databases and all the transactions are going on?
So let's see. I mean, if we talk about first thing, we talking about to access the private content for using Cloudfront, not using the S3. Using Cloudfront, I mean, AWS provides us with Cloudfront certificates. By using those certificates, we can access the private content. Okay, so I mean, there is a concept called signed URL kind of thing, right? So by using those certificates, we can, we can create the signature for a particular object.
Okay.
Which generally valid up to maximum 20 hours. While creating the signature, we generally provide the timestamp. How many minutes, how many hours we want to. I mean, we can say the newly generated URL will valid. Using that functionality, we can access the private content from the S3 bucket. Or if you want to, do some kind of functionality, so in we can easily we can use Lambda over the. Let's suppose let's take a scenario. We want to. There is a private some private content or public content which is in the same bucket, and we want some kind of restriction like some private content should not be visible to the user until and unless they purchase some kind of plan. Right. So if we want to implement these things, and then in this case we can use Lambda with the Cloudfront. So there in Lambda Cloudfront there are 4 types of requests. Some kind of viewer request. So by using these functionality, which simply we can easily integrate Lambda.
Okay.
To filter out the request.
Oh.
Anything that?
No, sir. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks for that.
Oh. I'm closing the meeting.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.